Having a quorum of the Planning Commission, I would like to open the June 17th meeting of the Planning Commission, which will also be a joint meeting with the Historic Landmarks Commission. Since those commissioners are not in the room at this point, we will start with the Planning Commission preliminary matters to get that out of the way while we're waiting for them. So, Ms. Rodriguez, will you please call a roll for the Planning Commission?
Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Larson, absent. Commissioner Jordan.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobs, absent. Vice Chair Jostes.
Here.
Chair Bartlett.
Here. So with that, we'll move to preliminary matters and review the minutes and resolutions. The first minutes are those of June 10th, 2010. Are there any comments to those minutes from those on the commission?
Mr. Chair, I will be abstaining since I was absent from that meeting.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Others? Mr. Jostes.
Chair, move the approval of the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay. Under discussion, I did have comments that I would like to bring up before we vote on page 3 of the minutes under the public speakers. As I recall, the third public speaker was not speaking in support of the project. So you might want to double check the record. I think that was the property owner in front that was concerned about the parking impacts and other things. So
I'll reconfirm with the planner. Thank you.
okay. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 10th, 2010?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. And we move on to Resolution 005-10, which is for 401.5 Old Coast Highway. Any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the same thing would apply here about,
Yes.
you know, where it says 3 people appeared to speak in favor of the appeal.
Right, so the same comment would want to
Yeah.
reflect in the
But
resolution.
with that correction, I would move to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Second. Okay, and then the Resolution 006-10 for the Cancer Center.
Mr. Chair, move adoption.
Second.
Do I have a second for that? Okay, under discussion, Mr. Jostes, as the maker of the motion, I had questions on the wording of the motion as it shows. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Okay, page 4 of the resolution. The changes to the parking, I thought it was worded that we were going to reduce the parking to not exceed the minimum requirement, and that it was with the guise of reducing the mass, bulk, and scale of the parking garage. But the way it's worded, it's just up to the discretion of ABR. Was that how you intended it, or how you recall that condition in the motion?
Mr. Chair, I believe that's the way I framed it.
Okay, well, you're the maker of the motion. That's why I want to make sure that that was your intention.
Yes. However, it might be appropriate for staff to indicate the range of discussion on that particular issue so that ABR has the benefit of the comments regarding the parking structure itself, as well as those at-grade spaces adjacent to the creek, and they can conduct themselves accordingly, as you say.
So would that be additional information provided to the ABR then, or do we
I would
want to
just-
amend the motion?
I think it's just, to be straightforward, let's just keep the motion the way it is.
Okay. All right. Any other comments to the resolution? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Cato, are there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
No, there are not.
Any announcements and appeals?
Well, since we have a couple of minutes, I guess, the staff was yesterday got a tour of the airport by the airport staff as a training, and it was quite fascinating. We got to see the back of the house of the existing airport. We went into the where you check in your bags at American Eagle for American Airlines. We got to go back into their operations training and break room, which is about, I don't know, 12 by 12, and then into operations and into the back where the luggage goes onto the tarmac, essentially, and they're very cramped. It's amazing that they can have a high on-time schedule with the amount of space that they have to deal with. And then we got a tour of the new terminal that's under construction, which seems like it's going on time and on budget. They're trying to open by March of 2011. So that was pretty fascinating. Plus, we got to see the parts of the slough, and I think some of the commissioners got to do a site visit of the slough last winter. Anyway, if the commission is interested, it might be possible to get a similar tour from the airport staff. And one other announcement: we don't know where the HLC members are. I just called back down to 630 Garden Street, and they're not there. So.
I'm wondering if they thought it was at the Gebhardt room.
No, that's where we checked.
Right.
There's
Right.
no one there, so we're sort of at a loss. But Susan Gantz, the HLC staff person, is making some phone calls.
Okay. And nothing on appeals then?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Justice.
Might it be appropriate to take the discussion of what is lead and flip that with this so that we could...
Well, unfortunately, Ms. Kennedy is back at the city
I
finishing the PowerPoint and not here to move her forward. Okay, I'll move to open public comment. This would be for items that are not on today's agenda. So if there's any other topic that someone in the public would like to speak about, you could have 2 minutes. Please come forward. Otherwise, I will have public comment for each of the agendized items. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment, and we will take just a short break while we await the Historic Landmarks Commission members' arrival.
never knew what love could do. I can't believe you in love with me. Telling everyone, babe, that I know I'm on your mind each place you go. Can't believe you in love with me. Always place you far up above me. I just can't imagine that you love me. After all this said and done, to think that I'm the lucky one. Can't believe you in love with me. What love could do, I can't believe you in love with me. Telling everyone, babe, that I know I'm on your mind each place you go. Can't believe you in love with me. Always place you far up above me. I just can't imagine that you love me. After all this said and done, think that I'm the lucky one. Can't believe you in love with me. Oh, your eyes blue, kisses too. Never knew what love could do. Can't believe you in love with me. Telling everyone, babe, that I know on your mind each place you go. Can't believe you in love with me. Always place you far up above me. I just can't imagine that you love me, baby. After all this said and done, think that I'm the lucky one. Can't believe you in love with me.
Planning Commission meeting of June 17th. We have one member of the Historic Landmark Committee, Mr. Craig Schallenberger, that has joined. So before we start the item, I would like to ask the applicant if they feel comfortable moving forward with a joint meeting when we have only one representative from the Landmarks Commission. So if someone would like to speak on behalf of the applicant team.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Suzanne Elledge, representing the applicant. We've been discussing that ourselves, and of course we think there's a possibility that other historic landmarks commissioners will be coming, that they may have thought that the meeting started at 1:30, we hear, so perhaps we will have some additional members. I think that we would like to defer to your judgment. We definitely very much appreciated the opportunity to have a joint meeting so that we could make one presentation to both commissions and to hear the comments together at one time. there's a benefit to that, and we think it's beneficial to the two commissions as well. But there's a lot of effort that's got into having the meeting today for you all, as well for the team, as well as for the team. The public has been noticed, so it's a complex question,
Right.
and I wonder if you have some thoughts about it.
Well, we're certainly open to continuing the item, but then most of us have done the site visit and we have done
Right.
preparation. So I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners before we complete our decision. Mr. Jostis.
Mr. Chair, this was intended to be our first joint meeting with HLC, and I think it's really critical to the conversation that takes place up here for our benefit, and most importantly for the applicant's benefit, to hear the entire chorus of decision makers, so to speak. And so I think that while I was very much looking forward to hearing from you today, I think it's prudent to continue this to sometime in the near future, while our minds are still fresh regarding the site visit we had this week. But to ask, I just throw that out as an opportunity to have a more robust conversation about this project, which is,
Okay.
I think, the intent of the applicant.
Okay. Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Chair Bartlett. I concur with Commissioner Jostis and really want to send the opportunity back to the applicant and the team as to what you would be most comfortable with. I'm sensing from Mr. Hutter's letter dated May 20th that perhaps you're not in a rush to move this project forward. There have been some delays due to unanticipated challenges, I think, as you put it. So if you're not looking to move through the process very quickly, then perhaps we all have more time to do this in a very careful and considerate manner.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Cotto, what would be the potential dates if we were to go for a continuance, or do you need to confer with the applicant and the Historic Landmark Commission before we can actually establish that?
And we would have to confer with the Historic Landmarks Commission and with the applicant. Just from the Planning Commission standpoint, the July 8th meeting is available, although Commissioner Joseph and Commissioner Schwartz will not be attending that. The 15th is also available. Again, Commissioner Joseph and Commissioner Schwartz won't be attending that one either. And then on into July, August is all available from a Planning Commission standpoint.
Okay, so it looks like most all of the choices at this point would be an indefinite continuance.
It would be, yes. And we'd come back at the earliest possible time.
Do you have further comment?
It appears as though July 15th may work for the team, and of course we would prefer to do it as soon as we could. So if that date was available and it does work for the team and a quorum of HLC, then we'd like to proceed with that date.
Okay, and I think, as Mr. Cotto said, Mr. Jostis and Ms. Lodge will be absent.
Schwartz. Oh, sorry, on the 15th. Yes, that's
Yeah, on
true.
the
That's,
15th.
No, that's Commissioner Lodge won't be here. Sorry, I misread that.
Right. So, Mr. Jostis.
Mr. Chair, I will be diligent in reviewing the tape from that meeting and then providing specific comments or questions either before then or after then through staff to participate remotely, so to speak, so as not to hold up this, because I think it's important that we take this matter up as soon as we can.
Great. Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would do the same.
Okay.
Watch the
All right.
tape.
Well, with that,
and,
I would be looking
if I have
for
questions beforehand, I'd
I'd be looking for a motion then to continue this item to July 15th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All.
Mr. Chair, if I could also ask, due to the glitch in communication for today, let's really go the extra mile, Mr. Cotto, in ensuring with the HLC secretary and so forth that they are very clear about the joint meeting reschedule date.
Yes, okay. Thanks.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the continuance?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. So we will see you July 15th, and sorry about the...
We are too. We're very excited to be here
Considering
today.
the audience that you have, it's unfortunate. With that, we will recess briefly until we can confirm the arrival of our next presenter.
thought of you makes my heart sing like an April breeze on the wings of spring, and you appear in all your splendor, my one and only love. The shadows fall and spread their mystic charms in the hush of night while you're in my arms. I feel your lips so warm and tender, my one and only love. The touch of your hand is like heaven, a heaven that I've never known. The blush on your cheek whenever I speak tells me that you are my own. You fill my eager heart with such desire. Every kiss you give sets my soul on fire. I give myself in sweet surrender, my one and only love, my one and
Tonight I shall sleep with a smile on my face, dreaming of this thrill. Once more you will whisper, you'll kiss me. You'll kiss me right out of this world. When you kiss me, tonight I shall dream that someday I'll awake wrapped in your embrace. If you only knew my heart has vowed, so please don't push me off this close. Tonight I shall sleep with a smile on my face.
Hub International. So it used to be Ogilvy Health, but we were bought by Hub International. That's the old Caesar.
I shall dream that someday I'll awake wrapped, I'm wrapped in your embrace. It's you, only you, my heart has found. So please don't push me off this cloud. Tonight I shall sleep with a smile on my face.
Okay, having a quorum, we'll reopen the Planning Commission meeting of June 17th. We're on to item 4, which is a discussion item of what is LEED, and our presentation will be by Kathleen Kennedy, who is now in attendance. So welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Chair Bartlett. With your assistance, we'll be doing this presentation. We wanted to present this to you because we talk a lot about LEED, what it is, or that we require projects or encourage them to have LEED certification. And I wanted to just give you an overview and some detail about what that means. And when people are saying they are striving for LEED Gold, what does that mean in terms of the number of requirements and some details that they need to, and credits that they need to meet. So I'm going to go over that overview. LEED itself, I often forget, it stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And it was created by the United States Green Building Council. The council was created in 1993. It's a Washington, D.C. nonprofit organization. And they offer a lot of educational programs. They have a national membership, a lot of local and county-wide members and chapters. They hold an annual Green Build conference every year. And they created this LEED Green Building Certification Program. And they say that it's a voluntary, consensus-based national rating system for buildings designed, constructed, and operated for improved environmental and human health performance. So we asked, well, why LEED? Well, we all feel that it's necessary, but if you look at the statistics, you can really see that it is. In the U.S., buildings account for 72% of the electricity consumption, 39% of the energy use, and you can look at the rest of the list here. Very significant amounts. The first LEED pilot program began in 1998, so it has been around for a while. The first rating system was created in the year 2000, so that's what we call version 2. Another version came out a few years later. Most recently, we have version 3 back in April of 2009, although many projects that are in the process right now are still under the version 2.2. I was going to bring you the book. It's about 4 inches thick, the rating system, so I'm going to try to, Bruce has it there, condense it as much as I can. And that's just for the new construction. There's a whole number of other rating systems that we'll go over. The Green Building Certification Institute, GBCI, that's an independent third-party organization. They administer the LEED certification. They look at all the credits that are being requested and review those, and they also administer the credential for the professionals. So there's always seems to be some confusion. People say, "Oh, you're LEED certified," and I say, "Well, no. The buildings become certified, and the people are accredited. So if you're a person, then you have a LEED AP after your name. If it's a building, it's either LEED Gold, Silver, Platinum, or certified." There are a number of rating systems that are currently in effect. The new construction one is probably one that you'll be involved with the most in the city. As planning commissioners, we're looking at mostly new construction. There's also this whole list here, commercial interiors, schools, homes, existing buildings, and such. These are the steps, the basic steps to get LEED certification for your building. You register your project. That's done online through what's called LEED Online website. And the project teams are required to adhere to the rating system that's in effect at the time that you register. As you know, it takes a while to have the LEED Silver building certified, so it may be a few years in between, and there may be a new rating system when you finish, but you adhere to the one that you that was in effect when you registered your project. You track everything online. All the forms are filled out online. You upload your construction documents. There's also areas where you'd have to provide a lot of narrative explaining your project, upload photographs, specifications, lots of detail about your project. In order to meet your credit, you need to show through the website, through this online process, how you meet it. So there are 4 levels that I know you're familiar with. The LEED certified. There used to be 69 points. Now with this new version 3, there's 100 points, and then you can get extra points. So if you want to have your building be LEED certified, you need to get between 40 and 49 points. I don't know if you have it in front of you. A little handout, the project checklist, and that's for the new construction. Down on the bottom right, it has the number of points. And you can see throughout the possible number of points for each area. And we're going to go over those areas a little bit. So in order to get platinum, you need to receive 80 points. So that's a lot of points, a lot of areas you need to cover. So how do projects obtain points? Well, all projects must meet prerequisites, and they're listed on this little checklist too. All projects need to meet all of them in every area, and then the credits are attempted depending on what you want to, like what level you're looking for or what kind of credits would fit your project more.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Lodge.
Question, if I may. What are some examples of the sort of the base things you have to do?
Actually, I'm going to go over those.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but actually the sustainable sites part, which is the first section on your checklist, I'm going to go over that in a little bit of detail, and then not too much of the others, and we'll have some examples of how you can meet those credits.
Okay, so the sustainable sites are the ones that you have to do before you can get any credit.
Actually, each section, like if you look at the checklist, sustainable sites, you'll see a prerequisite number 1.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you just need to meet that one.
Right.
And then you go down to water efficiency, there's 1. But then energy and atmosphere, there are actually 3 that you need to meet.
Right, so
Okay.
those you're required to do,
Yes.
and you don't get points.
No points for
But
them.
you can't get points until you satisfy all the prerequisites
That's
in
right.
each category first, so.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
So here's just a list of the areas that are on your checklist. So here's one, the prerequisite of construction. They call it construction activity pollution prevention. So it needs to meet this prerequisite. And it's basically putting together an erosion control plan. And as you know, in the city of Santa Barbara, we require that. So that's not a big problem for projects in town here. It's already required. So they could check that off and know that they've gotten that taken care of. So the first credit in the sustainable sites is site selection. And the intent here is to avoid development on certain sites. So you want to avoid development on prime farmland, undeveloped land lower than 5 feet above a 100-year flood, areas where there are endangered species, a certain distance from a wetland or water bodies. So a lot of that would pertain to sites in the city of Santa Barbara. But what you do is you look and make sure you don't meet any of these, and then you could request that credit. So for most projects, I think within the city, you would get that pretty easily. So you can just check off yes and provide the information that's required on the website to show that, and you have 1 point. So you're on your way with that. And that's one of the early credits that you do before you, or request before you even get into developing the whole project. Some are done up front early on, some are done much later, so you'll see that later on. There's another one called development density and community connectivity, and there are lots of different ways to meet this, but basically the intent is to develop in an urban area, stay away from the green fields areas. There's some calculations as part of this. On a previously disturbed site, so if you're sort of downtown, you're half a mile from a residential area that has a certain density, and then you're half a mile or closer to at least 10 basic services. So you look at the services around. It could be a bank, grocery store, museum, park, things like that. So you need to show that you are within a half mile of all those services. And basically, the intention is to develop in more urban areas and not have urban sprawl. Again, that would be probably an easy one in the city of Santa Barbara. Another credit is brownfield redevelopment. The intent is to rehabilitate contaminated sites, and there are certain definitions in the rating system about what constitutes a contaminated site. We've had a few local projects, or I have in the city, that would get that credit point. Radio Square on West Carrillo Street, when that goes forward, that is a contaminated site, so they could get credit for that. 101 East Victoria Street has some remediation, and there are a number of sites, as you know, around the city that would qualify to one extent or another. There are a number of credits about alternative transportation on the list there. It's if you're located within a half a mile of a rail station or subway station, you could get credit. If you're within a quarter of a mile of one or more stops for public bus stops, bus lines, you could get credit as well. If your project provides bike storage, and there's a certain number and percentage, if you have a covered bike rack within 200 yards of the front door, and it's would be provided for 5% of the building occupants, you would reach this credit and get points for that. Or if you provide covered parking for 15% of the occupants in a residential project. So a little calculation is required for some of these. And then also changing rooms and showers, if they're provided, that's another option. Providing preferred parking for certain kinds of vehicles, low emission and fuel efficient vehicles only in this particular area would qualify to get a point for this. And here's just an example of preferred parking for carpools. In order to protect and restore habitats, one option for this section is to not disturb the site within certain parameters, and there's a whole list, not more than 40 feet beyond the building, not more than 15 feet behind roadway curbs and such like that. So you need to look at your site plan and see if you can locate the development within these certain areas. And if you can do that, then you would be able to get some points for that as well. And that was for greenfield sites. This would be for more Santa Barbara previously disturbed sites. You would either need to restore or protect 50% of the site, and not including the building footprint, or a total of 20% of the site, whichever is greater, and you would restore that with native vegetation. Also, to maximize open space is important. If you can exceed the local ordinance requirement by 25%, you would get a point for that, or if the city doesn't have an open space requirement, just overall provide 20% of vegetated open space on the site. Some strategies that are suggested are to stack the buildings, so multi-story projects would provide more open space, have underground parking, or then have shared parking with an adjacent property. Stormwater design in regard to quantity and quality. City of Santa Barbara, we have our SWIMP requirements, and basically if you meet those, in general, you meet these requirements. We have more strict than some jurisdictions, so you meet the city requirements, you're able to meet these. And some of the ways you can do that is through bioswales. I'm just showing you a few examples of slowing down the runoff and treating the water. It's another example of bioswale area. green roofs as well. And rainwater harvesting, collecting the rainwater and using for irrigation. Let's see. We're also concerned about creating heat islands. There's roof and non-roof. For the non-roof areas, for the on-site areas, the requirement is to provide 50% of the site hardscape to be under shading. So you can provide shading like this in a parking lot, or you can use light-colored surfaces instead of blacktop, or pervious pavement. Or you can, another option would be to provide 50% of your parking under cover. In order to reduce the heat island effect on roofs, of course, we have, again, green roofs. And there are a couple of proposed projects. You just looked at the Cancer Center. They're proposing a green roof on part of their new building. 101 East Victoria Street also included a couple of smaller green roofs on their buildings. Another big issue is light pollution, and this rating system addresses both interior and exterior, try to minimize the amount of light trespassing out from the building out into the site, the surrounding site. So there's certain calculations you can do to minimize that. And if you do it to a certain extent, then you can receive those points. It's just a shot of exterior light pollution. There's certain zones. If you live out in the rural areas, there are certain requirements. If you're downtown or in a very urban area, there are other requirements that need to be met. That covers sustainable sites. We have a whole list of other areas. I'm not really going to go through those too much, but it has to do with water efficiency and reducing the amount of water that the project is using through landscaping, wastewater technologies. If you reduce the water even more than 20%, say 30%, you get another point. If you reduce it 35%, you get another point, and even more, 40%, you get more points. Energy and atmosphere is another section, has to do with the energy systems in the building. I'm just going to skip over that, basically. Materials and resources. A prerequisite to that is to have storage and collection of recyclables on site. And of course, you know, we require that in the city as well, so that's an easy prerequisite to meet. And then for the others, these come into play more during, of course, construction, because not all these details are worked out early on. But the owner can look into different kinds of materials to use, see how much recycled content they can use, trying to find materials that are from regional sources. Certified wood is often used. So a number of different ways to get materials and resources to limit their impact. Indoor environmental quality. The prerequisites for this are a certain minimum air quality performance is required, and then another one is to have minimum exposure to tobacco, either having outdoor smoking areas for people or in some places no smoking allowed. And then there are lots and lots of credits about this and lots of detail about ventilation, keeping all the materials having low emitting kinds of adhesives and sealants and paints and flooring and all those. And that information needs to be all uploaded onto the website and explained about what kind of materials you're using, what kind of lighting. Also, in regard to daylight, the location of where people are sitting in relation to windows and how much light is coming in, and if they can see the window from where they're sitting and can see outside and have views. Those are all important aspects of this. The innovation and design is an area where you can earn more points. If someone is more creative, they want to exceed a credit, and they've found a different way to do that no one's really looked at before, they can request that this be reviewed, and perhaps they could get points for that. Or they can come up with a completely new category that hasn't been evaluated yet and request points for that as well. And there's also to have a lead AP, accredited professional on your team is required, and you get 1 point for that, which is great. And I tried to count, I think there's 7 people in the city right now that are lead AP. There may be more, and I know there are other people working on it. So that's
Well,
great.
as yourself, you really didn't
Yes.
announce that at
Yes.
the beginning. So.
Myself and yourself, Bruce. Yeah. So it's been very interesting. There's a new credit that I'm not that familiar with because it is very new with the version 3. It's a regional priority credit. The USGBC Council and chapters have put together different credits that are more applicable to the region and the country. So in this particular area, Santa Barbara, there are certain credits that you can get that apply to this area more. There are a number of other processes. You can appeal if you feel like you're not getting the credit that you, or the point that you are requesting. You can appeal that. You can also have some credits interpreted. There's a whole process for that as well. There are a number of ways that credits interact with each other. If you try to get one and you get points for that, you can also get points in other areas. And I'm going to turn this over to Bruce at this point to explain how that works a little bit.
Thank you, Kathleen. Well, I think you've done a good job explaining, all the complex categories, but it's not really as complex as it looks on the list. I mean, most of the things that we see on the LEED checklist are things that we all know we should do, but this is a way to kind of legitimize all the decisions that are made throughout the course of a project and to create a form or a goal so that at all aspects of a project, everybody is trying to achieve sustainability. And this process isn't a checklist for the architect. I mean, all of these steps are either the responsibility of the owner, the architect or the lead AP that is assigned to the project and registering the project, or the contractor. It's a complete process, and it's not really achieved by what you put on the plans. I mean, it's not achieved until the project is done and all the paperwork and the recycling certificates and the dump site certificates and everything are compiled, that you know how many points you have and what level of certification you've achieved. So it's a process that all parties need to buy into, and you really need to do it early. Otherwise, you're going to give up the early points, and it's hard to go back and try and create the legitimacy you need to establish those points. So, to kind of go back through what Kathleen outlined, there's a lot of categories. The early ones are where it's the easiest to obtain points, and I think that's where our role as planners and designers, where we need to really kind of exert our influence. And the first key one is to have the owner select the right site. I mean, that's probably the easiest decision you can make. Once you choose the wrong site, then you're already going down a path that's much harder to achieve points, because then you have to overcome it with, excessive efficiency on mechanical equipment or some other mechanism to achieve points. It's much easier if you pick the right site that has the right orientation, that isn't, a green field. Maybe you're restoring previously disturbed site or polluted site. So you really want to guide the owner into picking the appropriate site in the right location for the type project you're doing. So that's one of the earliest decisions, and that will really evolve into a lot of points as you move through the other categories. And it wants to be in the right location. I think you mentioned relative to transportation and a lot of the other attributes. And then how you develop that particular site, you want to be minimizing the footprint of the building. You want the building in the correct orientation. And then there's all the sort of trickle-down attributes associated with that by doing either multiple levels or tucking the parking under so that you can maximize the open space. And once you start achieving all of these what seem to be individual goals, you'll find that there's really a synergy between them, because once you make a compact footprint on your building, then you have more landscape area that then reduces the water runoff, and the more landscape you have helps to purify the quality of the runoff. So you can see if you start making the right decisions, you gain points in many categories just by making one right decision. So what's really interesting about this is to understand the synergies between all the different categories so that you're picking things that work well together rather than counteracting each other. So I think that's probably the most important lesson to be learned in all of these things, is really understanding how they work together. You know, I know a lot of commissioners don't quite understand, you know, like the benefits of a green roof, or what's it about? Is it more landscaping, and how do you get on the roof to mow it? And I mean, really, the whole intent behind a green roof is multifold. I mean, it acts as insulation, you know, for the interior space. It reduces the amount of runoff because a lot of it is absorbed and then dispersed later so that you reduce your peak water flows. It also improves the water runoff quality, so you're affecting the quality of the water. And it also, you know, can tend to reduce some of the landscape watering requirement. You can then recapture that water in cisterns and use it in other parts of the landscape. So a lot of these categories affect many other categories. You know, if you reduce the amount of water used internally within the building, then that in turn will gain you points by reducing the amount of wastewater generated in the building. So many of these categories are linked, even though it looks like a separate list. I think if you use them appropriately, it's a good kit of parts that you can put together. And you know, once you get beyond the site attributes and the water use, it's similar with the other categories. A lot of the choices that you make in the energy and atmosphere category are linked to other uses, and the same thing with materials and resources. The first thing you want to do is, I mean, the most sustainable you can do is to reuse an existing building rather than tear it down and replace it with a new building. So you get points for the more you can save of an old building, percentage-wise, the more points you can achieve. And then if you save the material that you remove from that building and reuse it or recycle it, you can gain points. And then the new materials that you need for your project, you can either use recycled materials from other projects that you get from recycled yards, or you can buy, you know, locally harvested materials that are within a certain radius of your locale, which I believe is about 500 miles. And you can also use certified woods, which are the rapidly renewable, so you're not using old growth stock. So there's a lot of ways then that you can use the most appropriate materials within your project, either from where it's from or if it's been used before. And there's also the recycled content. There's a lot of products that are made from recycled you know, plastics and glass and everything else. So there's a lot of ways then just through the materials used on the project to attain points. And then the indoor environmental quality category is mostly for the mechanical engineering types. That's a hard one, I know, struggling through the exam with all the intricacies of that. But the principles are good, and it's all about, you know, creating a healthy living environment and, you know, eliminating all the smoke pollution and the other things that are associated. But these are the expensive points. If you haven't got the planning points correct to try and make up for it by radical mechanical influences, you're going to pay dearly, not only for the equipment and engineering, but then for the commissioning, which is actually monitoring of the project after it's been completed to make sure that it has achieved sort of the levels of performance that you've set out with in your goals. And then Kathy did talk about the innovation and design process, which really, I think, opens the doors for designers to come up with new items that haven't really been developed yet. So, you know, like geothermal and all the other things that have come about recently, you know, the first people to utilize those before they become mainstream can actually get points for doing something that is very creative. And then also within that category, is the sort of educational experience that can be associated with the project. If you almost do a demonstration project where it's very obvious to the public and it informs them of the systems that you've integrated so that they can learn from this process, you can actually get points in the educational aspect of your project. And I did take the exam prior to the new regional priority credits, but I know that was one of the criticisms that I had in doing all the studying is that sort of the national standard that was set up for LEED didn't appear to be regional enough, because the only way you could get certain points under the version 2.2 was you had to have air conditioning and it had to be high efficiency. But if you've got an instance where you can do passive ventilation and not have air conditioning at all, then you didn't get any points. So now that they've regionalized it, I think the drier climates that can utilize some of the passive ventilation get points for achieving those goals. The wetter climates where there's more rainwater recapture or other techniques that make sense in those climates, they've been sort of divided up into the regions so that nobody's getting penalized for sort of a national standard on something that really isn't applicable to your region. So I know Kathleen and I will probably be faced with continuing education to maintain our LEED accreditation and learning the intricacies as they unfold and they add new things to our repertoire here. But it's an interesting process. The hardest thing about it, I think, in terms of studying and taking the exam is that the exam is all memory and you can't have any notes, and it's very technical and a lot of numbers and percentages, and they'll throw out a sort of a word question scenario on a potential project and then ask you a myriad of questions about it, and so it's tough. So but it's good. I think in a way it's made the process maybe a bit more cumbersome than we wish it was, but I think once you go through it, then you realize that it's actually more simple than it looks on the surface, and once you understand how these things work together, it's almost like second nature, and that this is just a process for how you go about achieving the points to get the certification. So the real benefit is to understand how this works so that you try and apply that on projects just as a natural progression. And I think that's what's important for us as planners, is these first few categories that we can affect the most and that have the biggest impact on project efficiency is dealing with the sites and the site planning and how you deal with water and runoff and all the other things that we can really control, I think, on a planning level. Beyond that, it turns over to the engineers, and it's tweaking little dials and knobs to see how efficient they can do it on the tail end. But it's really getting the concept right, I think, that's the key for us here on Planning Commission. So, Ms. Lodge, I see you've got your light on here, so...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. We've had a few projects come before us that are proposing green roofs, and I have some concern about that in terms of water use, which is a resource we have to be very careful about preserving. And I wondered if there's been much experience with them. I can see, say in the Midwest or in the East, where there's there are thunderstorms and rain throughout the season, or snow or something to keep it going. But I wondered how it's worked here and what the issues have been with that and how effective it is.
Kathy, do we have any built examples yet within the city or that have come through recently? I know there's several proposals that have come through, but I don't think they're completed yet.
I don't think so. I haven't seen any. I think it would be great once we do that we could have a little field trip and check it out and see how it's working.
You can go to San Francisco and see the California Science Museum, and the roof it's not flat. That's hills and dales.
I know there are many in other cities and states for sure. And I did want to just talk, after you have your questions, about some other LEED projects in town, some examples.
Oh, right, and I have a couple examples at the end of the show, and I can maybe talk about the green roofs more, but it's early work that really predates LEED even being established. But I know that there's several projects that we've reviewed that have it, so it would be good. Maybe we can do a follow-up if some of those get built. I think it would be informative for all.
Great.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Cotto.
I have a question about, looking at energy and atmosphere. It looks like there's one potential credit that is super credit. You can get up to 19 for optimizing energy performance. Do you or Ms. Kennedy, do you know why that one's so, I don't know, important?
Which one are you looking at on the list?
Energy
For
and
energy and
atmosphere, it's
atmosphere.
credit number 1, optimize energy performance. You can get up to
I'll-
19 points for that.
I remember with the version 2.2, I think it was 10 points, so I'm not sure the latest, but it was more and more energy efficiency. The higher level, you get one more point for each, certain percentage over and above. So I believe that's...
Yeah, this had a sliding scale. If you reduce the energy efficiency or increase the efficiency by like 3.5%, you'd get a point, and then if you went up to 7%, then you got 2 points. So they created a sliding scale. So if you really get a lot more efficient, you can rack up a lot of points.
I see.
So again,
I
these
have-
are the expensive points because you're talking about really expensive equipment, and then it also has to be measured and verified and confirmed after installation that it's achieving the efficiency that you quoted. That's why you never really get your LEED certification until after the building is built and tested. So I know a lot of people want to try and condition LEED certification on approval of a project, but it's not just about the plans. If the contractor doesn't recycle the waste products off the job or whatever in an appropriate way, you can actually lose enough points to not achieve your goal. So it takes the part of everybody all the way until it's done to really get there. So no matter what you have on the plans, unless it's built appropriately, you won't achieve those points.
Interesting.
Mr. Chair, I did have another question, which relates somewhat to the energy efficiency. To do that, you need insulation, you need windows, double glazing, windows that really close, no leaks and all of that. And in the past, I've heard some comments about interior air quality when you do that. And is that still an issue? I know I was talking to someone who lives in Manhattan. Their windows are triple glazed, and they're not supposed to ever open them. But they just feel after a while as if they've got to open them to get some other air in the space. Could you?
They are related, and when you go to the indoor environmental quality section, there's points for getting increased ventilation, and there's ways you can do that either with natural ventilation or mechanical. And then there's a lot of categories that talk about using the appropriate materials that don't off-gas, because that's really the issue when you have the tightly sealed buildings, but you don't build with the appropriate materials. You've sealed in sort of all the off-gassing components. So when you start utilizing these in tandem, you can actually have a tighter building that's healthier if you're building it with the appropriate materials. So. And then also with the lighting efficiency, if you have more efficient lighting or day lighting, sometimes you can reduce the mechanical loads as well, which then reduce the energy consumption, which gets you a point in another category. So if you start using all these in tandem, then they really compound, and it makes for a much more efficient building. But yes, you do have to be careful that achieving points in one category doesn't sacrifice, the quality of life in another.
Thank you.
Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For a project applicant seeking maximum credits in this certification, beyond just doing the right thing for the environment, being environmentally conscientious, are there other tangible benefits that come to the project or the project owner if they achieve one of these higher levels of certification?
Well, I think other than just good for the environment, I think maybe buildings last longer. There was some statistics I read about that. The life of buildings are extended.
There are a lot of other categories that you wouldn't think of that are associated with this. If you have a really comfortable working environment. All of a sudden you find people aren't sick as much, they're more efficient, which means the business is more profitable, and not to mention, tax credits and the other things that may be associated with some of the things you're doing. So it does sort of spread out into a bigger gamut of, it's like a win-win situation, not only for the building owner, but the business operator in a particular building. Mm-hmm. So if you have a healthy working environment, you have less absenteeism and more productivity, and it spreads around.
That is a major point of the rating systems. You talk about the buildings and the materials, but it's all related to the people that are working there or visiting or living in those homes. That's the reason why
and many
you're
of the
doing it.
points are only achieved once you have surveys done by the occupants as to the satisfactory level of performance of the mechanical systems and the light and the ventilation. So it's not only building it right, but it's getting the comfort and controls for the individual occupants to where they're happy that you achieve more points as well. So there's follow-up surveys. That's why you don't get the points the day it's finished. Sometimes you're a year past the date of completion before you really know what level of certification you've achieved.
Ms. Kennedy, as you review the city lead projects, do you have information to let us know which have achieved these various levels? Okay,
Yes,
that'd be
and
helpful.
if you're ready, I
thank
can
you.
go ahead, and I have a little bit of information about these. I just looked at the three more recent ones, I guess, 630 Garden Street, which I'm very familiar with, and then the airline terminal that's under construction, and then the rental car quick turnaround facility out at the airport as well. So the Garden Street one, that was under the LEED existing building operations and management rating system. So it's a little different, but we received LEED Platinum on that. So if you go down there, you'll see the plaque on the front of the building. And a number of the things they did was electricity through solar panels. They're on the roof, on the building behind, installed low-flow plumbing fixtures, and then they have this green cleaning program for the custodial services. They just using those environmentally friendly products and such. I also had to be part of that survey. Everyone that is in that building received a survey, and we were asked how we feel about the air conditioning and the system, how it's working for us. At the airline terminal, of course, that's under construction, and they are seeking LEED Silver. I'm not sure where that's going to end up, maybe better than that, but they've addressed a number of the issues here, and I just have a list. Water efficient landscaping, pretty much everything that's on our list. Water conserving fixtures, bicycle racks, preferred parking for carpools, a lot of open space, energy efficient buildings, on-site renewable energy, using recycled content in their materials, using certified wood. There'll be daylighting and views, and a number of the areas of the building, the ventilation systems, and such. So we'll see how that goes, and that would be interesting to see what points I get for that.
Mr. Chair, yesterday at our site visit, Karen Ramsdale, the airport director, was giving us a little intro, and she thought that it would clearly make silver, and they were maybe even potentially try for gold certification.
Good. Well, I think you mentioned potential of a field trip, and I think follow-up on this project, because of not only what it is, but what it's trying to achieve, would be good for the commission, good feedback. I think, and others that have these attributes, that if we could get feedback on how they're doing. I know it'll take a while on some of them until they're finished, but.
The airport rental car quick turnaround facility, which we didn't go to. I was hoping we had, but here's a photograph of it. And I guess one of the exciting things about this is that they have this solar monitoring, this live, what's it called? The live monitoring of the solar power that's generated. So it'd be nice to look at that. And all city-owned buildings are required to achieve or strive to achieve silver certification, which is one of our green policies, which is great.
Ms. Kennedy, do we know where we are in achieving at least silver for all city-owned buildings? You keep a running list, for example?
I'm not sure that there's a list, but any new projects like the Garden Street received platinum. The quick turnaround was, did I say what that was? Silver, and the airline terminal is striving for silver or above. I think even the Granada Garage there may be a few others and I could check into. It would be nice to have a list. And I think any project from this day forward would need to be LEED silver. And if you want to know more, there's a great website, USGBC is the website, and lots of information about any of these areas that you might be interested in. It just goes on and on about how much information that's out there.
Well,
If you'd like
and
to
with
learn
the
more.
goal of, not chopping down more trees than we need, everything about the LEED process is done online. You register online, all the points. You don't send paperwork back and forth at all. So it's really a paperless process in terms of all that processing. So I think they kind of took the sense of what they're trying to achieve and incorporated that into the way that they handle LEED and the points. So.
Well, that concludes our presentation. If you have any other questions.
Do you have those other slides that you were going to put up?
I do.
Okay. I had Kathleen add just slides from a couple of the projects that my firm has been involved with over the years, and some of these are old enough that they predate LEED, but they, I think, were the predecessors and kind of led the way into creating a process so that you can document what you've done and try and encourage others to do it. We had the opportunity back in the early 80s to get involved in a design competition for the headquarters and demonstration facility for the Community Environmental Council up on Miramonte, and we won the design competition and got the award to design and complete all the drawings, and the building is built. And it incorporated, I think, a lot of sort of leading technologies for the time. We had all the sustainable gardens. We had green roofs on some portions of the buildings. We had the photovoltaic collectors, solar panels, the TROM walls, which are the heavy mass walls internal to the building that absorb heat during the day to give it off in the evenings. And this whole facility was really designed as a demonstration center, and that people would come from around the world to study and live here for periods of time and really understand how all these systems interact. And it was really sort of an expression of the whole notion of what CEC was about. So this was an important calling card for them, was to have an appropriate facility, and it served them well for a number of years. And you may want to go on to the next slide, if you will. And now the ultimate in recycling, this whole building is being recycled as part of the visiting nurse project that we reviewed a year or two ago. And this piece is going to be the sort of public heart of house for that new facility, and the new hospital portion and care is going to be wrapped around it and integrated, but they're saving this important piece, so I feel good that it's really served more than one life, and that's the other attribute, I think, of efficiency, is to have a life beyond that which was originally envisioned. And then the other project that I brought this was the before shot for what is the Hayward Design Center, and this predated my being LEED accredited, and it has won a lot of green awards, but you can go to the after slides. This was right after it was built. It looks different now. All the green screen has been filled with vines and so forth, but it was a way to really engage the public and the contractors and bring them face to face with the appropriate building materials and techniques so that they could actually see it in use and let them be able to buy and see examples of how to use the products. And if you go to some of the subsequent slides, like on this one, we had all the parking spaces were permeable gravel, the driveway areas were the permeable paving. We did these demonstration arbors down the two sides of the parking lot that have these elevated watering troughs to to really make a demonstration out of how to reuse and recapture the rainwater that was stored in cisterns, and then it was pumped into those troughs with drip emitters and used to irrigate the landscape. And then interior in the project, we had a lot of examples of all the different materials, the corks and the harvested woods. And then they had completed products and assemblies, all the doors and windows that you could buy that were made with these certified products. So it was really a full-on exhibit of what's possible, and to let people really come in contact and understand what's currently available. I think most people have the perception, that being green is only about applying green finishes or a solar panel, but it certainly goes much beyond that. Mr. Cato.
Chair Bartlett, where is this?
This is on Olive Street, directly adjacent to our Noldies. In fact, the stone wall you see on the right of the picture is the wall of our Noldies.
Oh, it's set the way back.
Sets back, yes. Yeah, it's on Olive. Right, and then if you scroll through to some of the other pictures, so we used a lot of the sustainable woods. Here, the green screen that we put up on the facade, you can barely see the vines starting to grow up on it, but we also incorporated a lot of the trellis and shading elements over windows. And then if you go to the next slide, I think that's kind of it's hard to see with all the light, but that's that elevated watering trough that goes out on both sides of the parking lot to irrigate the landscape that is fed from the rooftop cisterns. And then I think the last shot shows there's the little drip emitters along the way that then meter the water out into the landscape. So we really tried to take these principles that are normally underground and not visible to the public and really make them a demonstration item so that people could connect the dots and figure out, gee, I could do this at my house or on my project. So I think had we gone through, the LEED certification process from the beginning, we probably would have had a lot of points, including those of being able to educate the public. I know we incorporated a lot of the same thinking in our office building renovation, but in trying to go back and get LEED certification after the fact is really hard when you don't have all the contractor records on where every dump load of material went and this and that. So it's something you really need to do it from the beginning, and that's why this whole process of LEED, you really register your project online at the inception when you're first looking at the site and as you make all these decisions, because once you get beyond that, it's hard to go back and get the records you need to legitimize your points. So that's why they encourage you to start way at the beginning. It's not like you wait at the end and then add up and see if you could get it. So anyway, it's a commitment by the owner, the designer, and the contractor all the way through if you're going to go this route. But it's a lot to absorb, but it's all important material. And I think it really relates to what we're trying to achieve on a larger scale, even with Plant Santa Barbara. You can take a lot of these principles and try and apply it to the city. And, how do you handle your stormwater runoff, from the streets and all the other areas. And so a lot of good lessons to be learned. Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm seeing a very strong twofold benefit in moving in this direction. I'm so pleased that the city at least has 3 buildings online now with LEED certification. Of course, we have the mitigated environmental impacts in certifying our buildings, but then also there are long-term cost benefits. And I think for those who might be particularly sensitive to the costs, the investment, financial investment associated with executing at this highest level of standard, we want to continue in the city in expressing this twofold benefit so that people can see it's not just about the environment, although that's a priority for some, but also for others, they are as concerned, if not more concerned, about the financial investment in moving in this direction. So I'm hoping we can continue to express the whole benefit as we communicate with the public and others.
No, it's not.
Oh, you shifted.
We're in the wrong chair.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of echo, I think, Commissioner Schwartz's views, and I guess it's just part of the burden is the certification takes place when it's all done. because I think you probably said it very politely, but I think it is either viewed as a badge of honor to wear on your lapel, as the chair has so graciously conversed for a bit, or other people just look at it as a financial burden to try and get over, regardless of the long-term benefits, because they're just thinking short-term. And I think it's to both our benefit and our challenge to try and figure out a way to push that, to offer either incentives or penalties in both the development process or in the financial world to get to that place. You know, the pending Santa Barbara County, what are they calling it, Empower Santa Barbara County program, that's pretty tangible for me with a big south-facing roof. I know what I'm going to get in my pocket. I know what it would cost me to do it without them. I know what I gain on that. And by the way, it's good environmentally, but the first hump I have to get over is the money out of pocket to put in a roof full of solar panels. And I can do that math in my little pea brain and get there pretty easily, and get to all those good things. I think a lot of the LEED process is still a mystery and smoke and mirrors to the normal guy on the street. And it should be the city's challenge to find ways to facilitate that process, whether it's better planning processes, easier planning processes, some type of incentives, and how that all gets structured when the certification doesn't come till way after, I have no clue. But I think the city process has to lead the way if that's where we want to go. Otherwise, it turns into just an in vogue type of thing for a select group of builders who can afford it, owners who can afford it, or design teams who specialize in that. And so I agree with you. I've heard both sides. I've heard that we need to do this, and I've heard you recognizing too the challenges that are there. But I think from a government standpoint, if that's where we want to go, that we also need to lead to get to that challenge rather than just say, go do it because it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons for all of us, and certainly with Plan Santa Barbara, we've all been talking sustainability, but being able to sort of connect all the pieces that are involved and to ask for things here on the Commission, we need to understand the intention of our actions. You know, when you want sustainability in a lot of landscape, and then at the same time you want to provide extra parking, you have to realize that they're in conflict with each other and that you're not really moving down the path in the same direction. So I think if you understand how all the parts and pieces work together, then at least you can kind of inform your decisions so that there is a common goal at the end. Otherwise, it's kind of Heinz 57 when you just throw all the parts and pieces and they counteract.
What's particularly good about the LEED process, though, is that it's quantifiable, and it doesn't rely necessarily on the design process and the horse trading, so to speak, that goes on what brings a benefit, what doesn't bring a benefit. So if you can continue to move that quantifiable process into the design role where there's actually a return, where there's actually a benefit towards me embarking upon this early, rather than just saying, I'm going to do this, and so somebody gives you something back from the other side of the aisle. If there's just an inherent benefit into the quantifiable process, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Also,
Kennedy?
we have an expedited plan check process for green buildings, and I don't know the details about that exactly, but if you're proposing a project that has a number of these elements, you go through the plan check process more quickly. So time is money, and that helps the average person to get through.
And I think you pointed out very clearly in your presentation that a lot of the sort of base requirements that we've imposed upon ourselves here in Santa Barbara get you quite a way into the LEED process, between our stormwater quality and all the other things that we take for granted. A lot of areas don't do this, so just the fact that you're building here gets you a good distance into this process. So if you just add a little bit more, it's pretty achievable, as long as you do it as you go. Mr. Cato.
Yeah, Chair Bartlett, I've thought about this a little bit, and coming up with incentives is a little bit more difficult for this because you don't know what level of building you're at until the end, right? Normally the way we do incentives is like, oh, well, if you do lead silver, then you'll get this. If you do lead gold, you'll get this. If you do silver, you'll even get this, right? But you can't do that because you don't know what they're going to get until it's actually built and occupied. So we'd have to think of something different. You know, as we had this discussion, you know, the thing that sprang to mind was maybe we could offer, you know, lead consultation early on. You know, if you're thinking of doing something or doing some development, why don't you come in and see us, and we'll get you on this lead path early on, because like you said, you got to start before you even find a site. You know, all that comes into play before we normally, by the time we see them, usually they've already come up with a site, they've come up with a design, and you're already kind of way far down the list, you know?
Right. Well, and a lot of the projects we've been reviewing lately, they're either in or adjacent to a flood zone or near a waterway, and there's a lot of things right there that are kind of telling you maybe this isn't the best site for that particular use, or if you want to achieve a certain level of certification. So because of the environmental sensitivity of, you know, some of those items, you know, maybe, you know, the site selection is probably one of the most crucial pieces. So that really starts from the inception.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you very much for putting this together. I wish I could have helped more with the presentation, but anyway, it's good. I wish more of the commissioners were here to understand it. I think Commissioner Jostis is pretty well there. He's pretty engaged on the environmental front anyway, but it's complicated, but once you understand how everything works together, it gets much simpler, and I think if we can just adopt the principles, we'll let the experts deal with the math and how to achieve points, but it's getting the principles right that really matters. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, our last bit of official business is the administrative agenda, committee and liaison reports. I know Ms. Larson is not here for the staff hearing officer report. Mr. Cato, do you have anything that you're aware of that you can report on that, or?
Chair Bartlett, I can report that yesterday at the show hearing, staff hearing officer hearing, the staff hearing officer approved one modification for the Sansom Clinic to allow an MRI trailer to be in their parking lot adjacent to, it's an alley, although it looks like just a traffic lane on the southern part of the property. And she also approved a housing authority project at 512 Bath Street, 53 units, including one manager's unit adjacent to Mission Creek. 2-story buildings in the front, 3-story buildings in the back, with modifications to allow trash enclosure to be in the side setback near the front of the driveway, parking modification to allow fewer parking spaces. That's pretty standard for housing authority. And then some distance between building modifications. And then a lot area modification for the bonus density.
Great. Yeah, Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you, Chair Bartlett. Question on the 512 Bath Street project, Mr. Cato. Did I understand correctly from the media reporting on that this is some kind of a joint project or partnership between the housing and another entity?
My understanding, it's a pure housing authority project. I didn't hear anything different.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Schwartz. Oh, Ms. Lodge. I'm going.
That's okay.
I know. Everybody's in the wrong seats today.
I think Commissioner Schwartz might be responding to the fact that this is financed through tax credits. So there was a private entity. It's not public financing, but the tax credits are what they're using these days to finance these projects. And the investor gets substantial write-downs on their deductions on their taxes.
That's what I got from the article, and so that's the partnership I was alluding to. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Cato. Are there any other committee or liaison reports since our last meeting? Okay, well, thank you very much for everything today, and this meeting is adjourned. Oh, wait, Mr. Cato, one more item.
Yes, sorry. Just on the subject of today's continued item, I know that the commission continued till July 15th. During the break, we were talking to the applicants, and one of their primary consultants is their architect who's out of town, and he's going to be back in town the week of the 21st, the 20th, that week. And they were wondering if we could have a meeting that week instead. So since he was planning to come down that week anyway, instead of having to pay for him to come down again. So I will be polling the commission and the HLC to see if there's an alternate date during that week that we could hold that joint meeting.
Okay. You just keep us posted. We want to make sure we actually have everybody here this time. So.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I will officially adjourn the meeting this time. Thank you.